This is the story of Multiple's alternate asset management and of the woman who built it, Renuka Ramnath. But it is really the story of one of the boldest bets in Indian finance, made not on a company, but on herself. At the very peak of her career, running the largest private equity firm in the country, she walked away to start again, alone, with no institution behind her and no guarantee it would work. To understand why that took such courage, you have to go back to a middle-class childhood in Mumbai and a young woman told she might be the only one of her kind in the room. In 2009, Renuka Ramnath had nothing left to prove. She had spent more than 2 decades inside one of India's most powerful financial groups and had built its private equity arm into the largest in the country. She was, by common consent, the first lady of Indian private equity. And then she did the thing almost no one at her level does. She left. She gave up the brand, the balance sheet, and the safety of a giant institution to start an independent firm with her own name on the line. In an industry, in a country, where a woman running her own billion-dollar fund was almost unheard of, it was an extraordinary act of self-belief. To see where that belief came from, we start at the beginning. Renuka Ramnath was born and raised in Mumbai, in a middle-class family in the neighborhood of Chembur. Hers was not a household of financiers or industrialists. It was an ordinary Indian upbringing, defined by hard work and academic seriousness. As a girl, she showed a wide range of talents, excelling not only in her studies, but in Indian classical music, painting, and stitching. There was little in that childhood to suggest she would one day command billions of dollars of capital. What it did give her was discipline, curiosity, and a quiet refusal to accept the limits that others assumed for her, qualities that would matter enormously when she chose a path very few women of her generation dared to take. In 1979, Ramnath made a decision that set the tone for everything to come. She chose to study engineering at the Veer Mata Jijabai Technological Institute, one of Mumbai's most respected technical colleges. When she enrolled, the principal himself cautioned her that she might be the only woman in the entire classroom. As it turned out, she had one other female classmate for company, but the warning captured the reality of the time. Engineering, like finance, was a world built by and for men. Ramnath simply walked in anyway. That early experience of being the exception, of being the only woman in the room, would repeat itself again and again throughout her career until she made a habit of it. Ramnath graduated with a degree in textile engineering in 1982, but her ambitions were already shifting from the factory floor toward the world of capital. She went on to earn an MBA in finance from the University of Mumbai, and much later would round out her education with the Advanced Management program at Harvard Business School. It was an unusual foundation for a future investor, an engineer's rigor married to a financier's instinct. That combination, the ability to understand how a business actually works and how it should be valued and funded, would become one of her defining strengths. Armed with her new degree in finance, she set out to join the institution that would shape the next 23 years of her life. In 1986, Renuka Ramnath joined the ICICI Group, beginning in its merchant banking division. It was a demanding environment of tight deadlines and heavy workloads, and she threw herself into it. Over the years that followed, she moved across nearly every corner of modern finance: investment banking, corporate finance, equities, structured finance, and even the early world of e-commerce. She was not confined to a single specialty. She became a rare generalist who understood how capital flowed through an entire economy. Each role added another layer to her expertise and her reputation inside one of India's most important financial institutions. By the turn of the millennium, ICICI was ready to hand her the assignment that would make her name. In 2001, Ramnath was named Managing Director and Chief Executive of ICICI Venture, the group's private equity arm, at a time when private equity in India barely existed as an asset class. Over the next 8 years, she transformed it, taking it from a proprietary fund of under $100 million into a private equity powerhouse, managing more than $2 billion of third-party capital, the largest of its kind in the country. It was here that she made her most famous bet. In 2003, she backed Ajay Bijli's fledgling multiplex chain PVR, investing about $8 million for a 38% stake, helping grow it from 12 screens to 39 and taking it public in 2005, roughly quadrupling the investment. She had become the face of Indian private equity. By 2009, Ramnath stood at the summit of her profession. She could have stayed for decades, comfortable and celebrated, running the country's biggest private equity firm inside a powerful group. But she wanted something different, to build an institution that was entirely her own, answerable to her vision and her investors, not to a parent company. Leaving Mint, giving up the ICICI name that had opened every door, and betting that global investors would trust her, personally, with their money. For a woman in her late 40s in India's male-dominated finance world, it was a genuinely risky move. Many quietly doubted she could raise a fund on her own. She decided to find out, and in doing so, Multiples was born. In 2009, Renuka Ramnath founded Multiples Alternate Asset Management. The name itself spoke to her purpose, to multiply value, to compound capital patiently over time. This would be an independent private equity firm, unattached to any bank or conglomerate, built around backing ambitious Indian entrepreneurs and helping their companies scale. She was no longer an executive inside someone else's empire. She was the founder, managing director, and chief executive of her own. But a philosophy and a name are not enough in private equity. To prove the doubters wrong, she had to do the single hardest thing in the business: convince the world's most sophisticated investors to write her, and her brand new firm, a very large check. The answer came in 2010, and it was emphatic. Multiples raised a maiden fund of $405 million, an enormous sum for a first-time, independent manager anywhere in the world. Crucially, it won the backing of one of the most respected institutional investors on earth, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, which committed up to $100 million. Multiples became the very first India-focused fund that CPPIB chose to back, a striking vote of confidence not in a big institution, but in one woman and the team she had assembled. The gamble of going solo had paid off. Renuka Ramnath had raised her fund. Now she had to put it to work. Ramnath built Multiples around a clear conviction that private equity, done well, is as crucial to an economy as commercial banking itself. Where banks lend against collateral, patient equity capital lets ambitious companies take risks, expand, and transform. Rather than chasing quick trades, Multiples positioned itself as a long-term partner to entrepreneurs, providing not just money but strategic guidance, governance, and the credibility to grow. The firm concentrated on growth-stage Indian businesses across financial services, consumer, healthcare, technology, and industry, sectors riding the long arc of India's rise. Ramnath often spoke of investing behind India's structural story, the rise of its middle class, its formalizing economy, its digital leap, rather than betting on fads. It was, in many ways, the disciplined, hands-on style she had honed over decades, now applied through a firm that carried her own imprint from the very first decision. Over the years, Multiples assembled a portfolio that reads like a cross-section of modern India. In financial services, a sector Ramnath knew intimately, it backed the housing lender Vastu, along with names like Cholamandalam and RBL Bank. In consumer and industry, it invested in Irvin Fashions, the auto component maker Sansera, and reunited Ramnath with PVR, now PVR Inox, the cinema business she had first backed years earlier at ICICI Venture, a rare case of an investor returning to a company across two different firms. And as India's digital economy exploded, Multiples moved with it, backing new-age companies such as the logistics platform Delhivery, the meat brand Licious, the insurance startup Acko, and the energy exchange IX. From old economy lenders to venture-scale disruptors, the firm proved it could spot and support builders across the entire spectrum of the Indian economy, and several of those bets went on to public listings. One fund became several. On the strength of her track record, Ramnath raised successive and progressively larger funds from global institutional investors, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and endowments who wanted exposure to India through a manager they trusted. Step by step, she built Multiples into one of India's most credible independent private equity houses. Today, the firm manages close to $3 billion, with a portfolio of around 30 companies across its funds, and a team that has grown far beyond its founder. What began as a risky solo venture had become a genuine, durable institution, one designed to outlast any single deal, fund, or market cycle. In doing so, Ramnath answered the quiet doubters of 2009 emphatically. Not only could a woman raise and run an independent fund in India, she could build one of the very best, entirely on her own terms. Renuka Ramnath's influence extends well beyond her returns. In an industry still overwhelmingly male, she became a role model and a trailblazer, living proof that a woman from a middle-class Mumbai family, once warned she might be the only one in the room, could reach the very top and then build something entirely new. She has served as a leading voice for the private equity and venture capital industry in India, including in its main representative bodies, an advocate for entrepreneurship, and a mentor to a generation of younger investors, many of them women following the path she cleared. She has regularly featured on lists of Asia's and the world's most powerful women in business. Her career reframed what was possible, quietly turning the exception she had always been into a template that others could now follow. So what is Renuka Ramnath's legacy? She helped build Indian private equity into a serious industry from inside a great institution, and then, at the height of that success, proved she could do it all over again on her own. Multiples stands today as the product of a single, audacious bet she placed not on a company or a sector, but on herself, at a moment when it would have been far easier to stay put. The girl from Chembur who was told she might be the only woman in the room spent a lifetime turning that solitude into strength. In the end, her firm is the answer to a question India's finance world once quietly asked: could she do it alone? She did. Thanks for listening.